think the attendees have slowed down now, so I think we should just get going, and I'm just going to welcome. I'm not going to talk for very long. I just want to welcome everybody and thank you all for joining us today, signing in wherever you are across Canada. I especially want to send a thanks to Stephanie Trattner because she had to create this talk. It's a little different than she would have originally given if it was in-house here. So we really appreciate that you took the time to do that, to be our first online talk. Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation and building respectful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada, I would like to acknowledge that while we are meeting virtually, the Parrot Gallery is located on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat people. And now I'm going to ask Lola Reed-Allen, who's the organizer of our Armchair Traveler Series, to introduce photographer Stephanie Trattner. Thank you very much. I'm signing off.
Thanks, Wendy. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in on our very first ever Zoom Armchair Traveler series presentation. And I do want to thank you as well, Stephanie. It's great. We did a run through the other day, and I know everyone's going to enjoy our short trip to Venice and really whet our appetite to get going almost anywhere, but Venice will be on my list for sure. Normally, we would be, as Wendy mentioned, we'd be hosting this live at the library, and maybe this fall we might actually get to do this. This is a program that curator of the Parrot Gallery, Susan Holland, and I started in 2017 to give 4 photographers each year a chance to show their work live in the gallery, in the corridor gallery. And you can see Stephanie's work online, and it is for sale. You can either look at it online or contact Wendy or Stephanie. And Susan and I were talking, and we thought, you know, it may be kind of fun. We've all remembered, or both remembered, going to travelogue presentations when we were kids and how we thought we might never ever get there, but what a great experience it was. And it really broadened our horizons. So we thought, well, why don't we give it a try? So that was 2017, and everything worked quite smoothly until 2020, and we all know what happened then. Anyway, let's welcome Stephanie, who is now living in Belleville. She's been here since 2010. She's originally from Calgary. She graduated from Vancouver's Emily Carr University, and not surprisingly, she studied photography. Following graduation in 2007, she traveled the world with an expense account, taking photographs for various publications about hotels and tourist attractions. During that time period, she also spent a year in London, England, and traveled to Venice photographing cruise ships. So that was all pretty exciting. Anyway, then during an annual pilgrimage to her hometown in Calgary, during the Calgary Stampede in July, she met her husband, Ken, who is from the Belleville area. So 2010, they moved to Belleville, started a family. Stephanie continued with her photography. And then in 2016, when their daughter started school, Stephanie opened her own studio that is on the corner of Victoria and Pinnacle. She does continue to travel, but like the rest of us, not too far these days. And she does travel to Venice, and especially to see the Venice Biennale, which we're going to see a bit of today. So everyone, let's welcome Stephanie, and it's over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wendy and Lola, for such a nice introduction. I want to thank everybody for coming in today. I know it's been a bit of a weird year, and this is a bit different than what we're normally used to, but I really appreciate your taking the time to spend some time with Venice, to spend some time traveling, and some time with some international art. So full disclaimer, some of the artist names are very, very difficult for me to pronounce. So I have, if you have any questions, please let me know and I will do my best. And I will have a sheet to the Parrot Gallery after this presentation that lists all the artists that we went through today. So you can, if you want to, look into them a little bit further. Anyway, here we go. Venice and the Biennale. I first visited Venice in 2008 to photograph a shiny, brand new Venice-killing princess cruise ship. If you were to ask me how I felt about the city of 118 islands after my 10-day stint, I would have told you not my favorite, and I'd rather not go back. 2008 was my first trip to Italy, and Venice was my only stop. There is widespread and some very good arguments that Venice isn't Italian, all that Italian. One of the main points being it didn't become part of the Kingdom of Italy until 1866, which is wild if you think about it. And to put it into context, a year later, Sir John A. Macdonald became our first Prime Minister in Canada. So the Venetian identity had been well and truly developed before it became Italian. Not knowing this, the first time I visited, I was expecting wonderful food, which you really have to look for in Venice. And I was expecting mopeds everywhere. It seems so silly to think about that now, but there is no mopeds in Venice. I was also looking forward to taking in the smell of the famed Italian jasmine as you wander the streets. And that really does not happen in Venice. What I did find was I was late for shoots because I never had any idea where I was or where I was going. I felt the labyrinth city was constantly working against me. Venice streets or pathways are not uniformed in any way. And even when you have a GPS, it's very common for it to take you the wrong way because pathways can be tiny and are laid out much like a web, with paths that are sometimes that sometimes don't even seem like a path. It almost seems like an entrance to a house, but it actually is a road that goes somewhere completely different. Another frustrating thing about Venice's infrastructure is that they number the buildings from a central square or shop or restaurant. So the square would be number 1 and span out from there, but you had to figure out where that central spot is in order for you to figure out where you need to go. So that is very frustrating. I had a friend who was backpacking through Europe who met me for a couple of days in 2008 when I was there. And one morning I opened the bathroom that we were sharing, which didn't have a window or a fan, and was confronted by the most potent rancid smell I have ever experienced. The smell was his clothes drying after he took a dip in the canal the night before to cross off swimming in a Venetian canal from his bucket list. When we were talking about it the next day at breakfast, one of the hotel employees who was Venetian emphatically told him he should go to the hospital and get checked out because it is very unsafe to swim in the canals. I also found an empty wallet when I left Venice in 2008 because I stuck to the touristy areas, which are insanely expensive. A year later, I was working in Europe, based mainly in London. A friend of mine was working for the art magazine Frieze, which is also published in London, and she was given the task to write about the Venice Biennale. I hesitantly agreed to join her in Venice, and after 4 days taking an international art, avoiding the tourist hotspots, and handing myself over to Venice and not fighting with the labyrinth city, and adopting the mantra, Venice will decide where I need to be, it became a place I returned to every 2 years. In the last 30 years, the population of Venice has gone from 150,000 to 60,000 people. This is due to the 20 million people who visit Venice a year. Properties are being snapped up by investors for hotels, Airbnbs, and restaurants, which is driving the prices up. A very humble Venetian apartment now will set you back upward of €1 million, which works out to be $1.6 million Canadian. A very completely unobtainable sum for someone who works in the service industry. Venetians have the biggest issue with cruise ships, and you will see protest signs all over demanding that they not be let into Venice. There are environmental reasons for this. For the motors of the ships strip the sediment and rock off the canals, and the water displacement from the size of the ships have been speeding up the sinking of Venice. They also dump a lot of waste and fuel into water, which is not great for some already very questionable water. The biggest reasons Venetians don't like cruise ship tourists is because they don't help the economy at all and are notorious for leaving messes behind. The typical cruise ship traveler will not dine in Venice as their meals are taken care of on the ship. They buy made in China mass-produced trinkets instead of supporting local artisans, and they are not paying to stay in Venice, therefore not paying not paying the room tax needed to keep up the city populated by tourists. Cruise ships can bring an extra 30,000 people to Venice in one day. During the pandemic, I've been reading that Venetians have really been struggling without tourism, and they are really ready to welcome it back. But I can see how the logistics of welcoming 20 million people, 3/4 of them being between May and September, would be hard on a city of that size. This is the Bridge of Sighs. The pathway was used to move criminals from St. Mark's Square to be hung or imprisoned. It's called the Bridge of Sighs because on the other side of the window we are looking at is a beautiful view of Venice and the Venice Lagoon. And as the prisoners were taken across the bridge, they would often sigh at the sight, knowing it was the last beautiful view they would ever take in. So I know it's like a very popular photograph for tourists, and when they're saying come visit Venice, but it has sort of a dark and sad history. I find how the buildings were arranged in Venice and the logistics, how they were built so close on a lagoon, to be very, very mind-boggling. Uh-oh. Sorry, I just had a bit of a technical problem. Sorry. I also find the skyline of Venice very interesting and extremely ornate. Layers of bright red clay roofs with terracotta buildings is a piece of art in itself. The logistics of the Venetian garbage collection is also mind-blowing. I don't know if you can see, oh, I don't have my pointer on, sorry guys. The garbage right here. The garbage men have large carts that they manually move up and down stairs and haul through the tight pathways. There are hooks by the resident doors. You can't really see it here, but there's hooks usually right there on the doors where people hang their garbage and recycling, and they don't leave them on the ground in case the water rises and the garbage ends up in the water. And so the garbage men come with their carts on foot, pick up the garbage and haul it to a boat that they have in a bigger canal. So it's like, it's something to think about when you're there, the logistics of garbage collection. This is the flag of Venice with the winged lion that has become a symbol of the city. The lion represents the Lion of St. Mark, traditionally a symbol of St. Mark, the evangelist. You can see the lion here, and you can see another lion there, and there are too many to count in the city when you're there. Here are some people getting ready for the Volanga, which is a 30-kilometer boat race through Venice. Originally, it was held as a protest for the use of power boats in Venice. The boat race are powered solely by rowing or paddling. Since its inception in 1994, this race has grown to thousands of participants. Any kind of boat imaginable, from kayaks to Chinese dragon boats, can be seen in this race. Some people dress up, but not in the typical Venetian carnival attire, as it is illegal to wear a mask in Venice outside of carnival time. Now that's changed with the COVID. You can wear the face mask, but the traditional like big Venetian ornate masks you're not allowed to wear outside of carnival time. I find the layers and textures of the Venetian buildings very interesting. If every layer in this building carries a story from a different time, you can see there's like, you can see 4 or 5 different layers in this one photograph. It's just really interesting to think about who was there and who put that on and who lived there before. It's just a cobblestone way. Really interesting texture. Again, more beautiful texture on the side of the building. Everywhere you look, there's something beautiful, even small ornate details, even in the doorbell. And this is a doorbell, again, with the Venetian lion. A local woman looking out the window. The appearance of Venice is taken very seriously by city officials. As you can see in this photograph, even the advertisement for Louis Vuitton handbag series inspired by master painters has to fit in with the look and feel of the building, of the city. And here's a close-up of that. It's a fake facade that they make look like the rest of the buildings that advertise their handbags. The light in Venice is very distinctive. And when you see a photograph of Venice, you know it's Venice because of the light. It has a very pink tone to it. This is because of the clay on the buildings and the water reflected. The water reflects the light everywhere. And then the clay, so the buildings are reflected in the water and they have a pink hue to it, the clay and the terracotta hue to it. And then the sun reflects off there. So it just gives everything a really beautiful underlit, even light to it, which is slightly pink toned. And I will say that I color balance my images, as any photographer does, but they're not toned or they don't have filters on it. This is actually the color of Venice in the summer. There's a law in Venice that all gondolas are black, and the law was made to eliminate competition. Being a gondolier in Venice is a very coveted, high-paying vocation that historically was passed on from father to son. As Venetians are leaving Venice, they have started to hand out 3 to 4 gondolier licenses a year, which does involve a very thorough test, almost as intense as the London taxi test, but not quite. There's the nice picture of the black gondolas. Venice isn't really known for its culinary excellence, but there is one meal, aperitivo, that is the best in Venice. It consists of nibbles, where it's calamari or these beautiful little bite-sized sandwiches, and it's always paired with Aperol Spritz, which are those beautiful colored drinks right there. And Aperol Spritz are Prosecco, Aperol, and sparkling water. It takes place around 4 o'clock and you should not miss aperitivo. This is the place where you can find the best aperitivo sandwiches, and it's very, very close to the Peggy Guggenheim Museum. So I recommend you check out both of those places. I'm not going to get in too far into the do's and don'ts of Venice a whole bunch, but I will definitely urge you to deeply consider your footwear when you're in Venice. It may seem like a great idea to look fantastic in your fancy shoes, but keep in mind you cannot take a cab when your feet hurt. The paths are entirely cobblestone or slippery slabs of stone. And if you are there in the summer, it is very hot and very humid. You will most likely be consuming your fair share of seafood and alcohol, which is a combination that make any feet puffy. There's also the risk of losing your footwear, such as flip-flops in the canal, as this poor lady experienced right here. You can see her flip-flop right here when she was taking photos on the side of this bridge. I wish I could say this was the only time I've seen this in Venice, but it is not. Another thing I urge you to consider when booking a room in Venice is the air conditioning. There are a lot of Airbnbs and even hotels that don't have it, or they have the air conditioning that looks like a snuffleupagus, where you have the tube that goes outside. So your window has to be open a crack, and mosquitoes live in water, and I'm gonna leave it at that. The main reason why I end up in Venice is for the Biennale. So what is the Biennale? The Biennale, in essence, is the Olympics of art. It was first organized in 1895 and has been in the center of the visual art trends and international cultural event ever since. It has a long, rich, interesting history, which is another long talk for another day. It occurs every second year. Biennale translates to biannual in English. It's in a designated garden in the southeast side of Venice, in a collection of old shipyards and residences of patrons of the arts around Venice. I've been going to the Venice Biennale since 2009, but I will cover 2019 in the following slides. There are 3 areas to experience the Biennale. The Giardini is the main area, and it is a designated park located on the southeast side of the Castello district in Venice. The Giardini has permanent pavilions belonging to specific countries who select an artist to be represented due to what's happening in their country. Politically, culturally, they select their up and coming artist. As the Biennale has grown, the Giardini was unable to accommodate new additions. So there are some pavilions that are in the Arsenale and also off both of them, which they call offsite, which we will talk about a little bit later. So in Canada, the National Gallery chooses the artist that gets to show in the Canadian Pavilion. And this is a photograph of the Canadian Pavilion in 2019. I thought it was a good place to start because we all was very comfortable with Canada, I think. Canada has been a part of the Biennale since 1952. And in 1958 was invited by Venice, which is how it goes, to open its pavilion. The Canadian Pavilion is considered an important architectural feature of the Giardini and has a special heritage designation because of that. A few artists selected to exhibit here were Emily Carr, Alex Colville, Rebecca Belmore, and Jeffrey Farmer. And I have a picture, Jeffrey Farmer. Yeah, so this is Jeffrey Farmer's piece in 2017. Jeffrey Farmer is a Vancouver artist who disassembles things and sort of puts them back together in a different way. So the pavilion in 2017, well, in 2018 was set for some renovation. So he took the pavilion apart and made it into a geisha. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Geisha? The artist collective in Summa, translated means to think, exhibited in 2019. Summa is a collection of Northern Indigenous artists. They had, in their video art piece, they illuminated Canada's forced relocation of Inuit people between 1950 and 1960. The power of media today to reclaim history, filled with thought and to see the best in us, is what their piece was about. It consisted of 3 video pieces, a historical recreation of a day in 1961 where Inuit life on the land changed forever, which was what we're seeing here, One Day in the Life of Noah Pugatik. And then the second piece was Silatuk, live from Flow Edge, which was a series of webcasts from Nunavut to Venice, focusing on a conversation on the Baffinland Iron Mine's proposed expansion. And the last one was Isuma Online, which was a collection of Indigenous language films, with subtitles in multiple languages. So that was they had 3 distinct pieces in the show. I'm not going to go through all of the pavilions, though I would love to, because we can't sit here for 3 days. So I'm just going to touch on the pieces that I still consider almost 3 years later. You are permitted to take photographs in the gallery. So you'll be seeing my personal documentation of the 2019 Biennale. This unfortunate typical scene was a part of French artist Leroy Prévoust's Deep Blue Sea Surrounding You, which was an immersive installation structured around a reflection on who we are, where we come from, and where we are headed. And that connects, and what connects or distances us from one another. It challenges the representation of fluid and globalized world, which we are finding out wasn't really real. And her work intertwines representation of desire and fantasized descriptions of nature. Brazil's Wagner and De Burkas exhibited their film Swingueira. Swingueira is a popular dance movement in northeast Brazil, fused with the word guerra, which means war. Swingueira was a deep and empathetic view of contemporary Brazilian culture at a time of significant and social tension in the country. The film explores the intense discipline involved in collective dance competitions, as well as gender, race, power, masculinity, and conflicts in ways that are often prohibited in mainstream cultural spaces. The music could be heard from all around the garden, which really drew you in. And the show itself was so charged that when we watched it twice, we thought about taking up dance.
Relacionados com as costas, dois tempos, a 7, foi. 5 não me toca.
That was just a little clip from. Moving on. Oh, maybe not. Do you guys want to see that again? Just kidding. Okay. This piece is called Vodka Pool by Romanian artist Dan Melahatiu as part of a group show called Unfinished Conversation on the Weight of Absence. Yes, it is a reflection pool full of vodka. The piece explores the symbolic qualities of alcohol serving as both a sense-numbing escape and a currency, and even in the situation we find ourselves right now, a product that is deemed essential. This piece was in Toronto on a building on King Street in 2017, I think. So some of you might have recognized it or even have seen it then. And just as we're touching on that, the artists that are chosen by the countries are usually contemporary artists with pieces that they have made within the last 2 or 3 years, or even specifically for the Biennale. I believe that the artist that Canada is showing next is making a piece specifically for the Biennale, but they do have retrospective shows which bring in older pieces and sort of like collective, this, like the Romanian exhibit, some of them, they were artists that were really prolific in the 80s. So they thought that these 3 artists really fit the theme of the Biennale and also spoke to what was actually happening in Romania at the time in 2019. Okay, this is the Polish artist Roman Stanchuk, who meticulously took the inside of a very real luxury private aircraft and put it on the outside. Handcrafted leather seats, cockpit, and onboard equipment are on the outside, and the wings and fuselage are inside of the aircraft. Stanchuk's career has been turning everyday objects inside out, but this particular piece, Flight, he is speaking to the paradox of modernity and Poland's transition to capitalism. This photograph does not do this piece justice. It was one of the most intricately disassembled and put back together pieces I have ever seen. Every wire and every switch is on the outside of that plane. You can see that this right here is the seats, and this over here I think is something to do with the cockpit. Anyway, it was quite spectacular to see in person. Venice has its own pavilion because why not? I'm going to read the copy from the catalog for this one, as I think it ties in brilliantly with this entire presentation. So please bear with me. When an individual is experiencing the urban fabric of the city of Venice and the plethora of narratives that we weave into it, they perceive a non-linear continuity. The process of wandering often evokes introspection and empowers the acceptance of your own histories as an adaptive knowledge, which is essentially collected and shared with this pavilion space. These collective practices do not entail addressing the public on a level of information, but instead seek to nurture the experiential aspect of the city, the organic and inorganic notion that constitutes it, as well as the intertwined exchanges among them. Eventually, the corporal cannot be limited to linguistics, hence the architectural design of the pavilion attempts to engage the visitors through the enlightenment of its artists that are conversing towards the realization of a single collective work as a response to their individual experiences in the city of Venice. And this is Austria's Renate Bertelsmann exhibit, Discord Ergo Sum. Bertelsmann is a leading feminist artist and pioneer of performance art. Her knife roses express the balance of anger and tenderness, or beauty and pain, attraction and repulsion, that is the center of the human experience, feelings that we are constantly moving through like a pendulum. It's interesting to note that Bertelsmann has been a working artist since the 1970s and was the first woman to have a solo exhibit in the Austrian Pavilion in 2019. All right, so that was the Giardini. We're going to move on to the Arsenale. So American-born Ralph Rugoff curated the 58th Biennale, which was in 2019, with the theme being May You Live in Interesting Times, which at first consideration I thought was a sweet sentiment until I found out that it's actually a translation of a Chinese curse. The curse being, life is better in uninteresting times of peace and tranquility than it is in interesting ones, which are usually times of discord and trouble. So what does it mean to curate the Biennale? As each country appoints their own artist for the pavilion? Well, there's more to it than that. In some very big, very beautiful, very old shipyards is the Arsenale, again in the Castello district, which is in the southeast of Venice. The curator fills these massive buildings with art that they see fit the theme and art that they feel that people need to see at that time. The artists are all from all over the world and are all type of artists. And we're gonna explore the Arsenale a little bit. Again, so I think it's made up of, I'm not sure, about 8 old shipyards, but 3 or 4 of them at the end are service pavilions for countries. So this is basically the group show. Okay, so this is Nabuyuki, a Chinese artist who explores the aesthetic and material aspect of sculpted objects. Her piece, Do Real Things Happen in Moments of Rationality, is a setup of a very fake idealistic nature setting. The materials used are indeed artificial, but they are displayed to perform nature. Can a recreation of reality be perceived as part of reality? Does it trigger the same emotional responses as it would if you had encountered it in the real? And this is George Condo's Double Elvis, which was the first piece that you saw when you walked into the Arsenale. This is Zanli Moholi, who is a South African activist and photographer. Her ongoing work, Faces and Phases, self-portrait series, fiercely works against muting and invisibility. She gives a bold presence to those excluded from the stories and pushes the viewers to be conscious of the damage they cause by omission. Zelaine's photographs were my favorite from the 58th Biennale. They are masterly executed, very large scale film black and white photographs. This is Cyprien Gayer's L'Ange de Foyer. It's a mesmerizing LED holograph. Cyprien's work is a pointed critique of the idea of progress. L'Ange de Foyer is modeled after Max Ernst's 1937 painting, L'Ange de Foyer. It's a historical appropriate, let me go back and take a look at it again because it's pretty neat. Historical appropriation caught in an internal silent loop, speaking to the artist's position on the capacity of destruction within us. You probably will recognize the figure from it because it is the figure from Max Ernst's painting. This is Jessie Darling's March of the Valedictorians. I'm not sure who the artist was here because I didn't document it, and I'm sorry, but it does show how it shows the architecture of the old shipyard a little bit that I thought you would find interesting, and also it's a beautiful piece. This is Martine Gurtiers. I'm sorry. She produces elaborate narrative scenes that employ pop culture tropes in order to explore the complexity, fluidity, and nuance of both personal, collective identity in terms of race, gender, class, and culture. Her work interrogates how identity is formed, expressed, and perceived. She states, I think of each work as a documentation of a transformative performance. I'm interested in every facet of what it means to be genuine, especially when performing in a role society would never cast me in. Interesting side note, one of her pieces was blatantly copied by a very famous musician for the cover of their album, and she was awarded a very sizable amount of money. And I think that tidbit is a perfect real life example of what she's just speaking about, and adds potency on her commentary of identity. I think it was Jay-Z who did it. Anyway. This is Korean Annika Yi. She doesn't consider herself as an artist. She uses art to present her self-directed exploration of science. She explores how sensory perception and cultural conditions is the formation of viewing and articulating memories, interactions, or even in identifying things. Her work is mainly focused around science and the truth that it represents. I think that, this is a quote from her, I think a part of my job is as an artist is to challenge a lot of these scientific principles and scientific method. And this is I didn't document this one either, but I just thought it was an interesting little clip. This is Lorenzo Quinn's Building Bridges. Hands have been in the Biennale for the last 2 years. All the hands are Lorenzo Quinn's hands. This is an installation that was at the end of the Arsenale, and it consists of 6 pairs of hands, which are arching over 50 feet over a waterway, made of white resin to mimic the white marble as seen around Venice, and the hands symbolize the need to build bridges and overcome differences. Lorenzo is Italian. Okay, as if the Giardini and the Arsenale weren't enough, there's also offsite locations. Patrons of the arts lend out their homes or spaces to different countries and artists and turn them into galleries. So it's a double whammy. You get to go check out real Venetian homes and buildings while taking in international art. Isn't that just a dream come true? There are also public works and sculptures dispersed around the city. One very famous one is Lorenzo Quinn's Support, which was a gigantic sculpture of hands reaching out of the Grand Canal, calling attention to climate change that threatens Venice. It also symbolizes humankind's capacity to destroy the world and equal capacity to save it. This piece was on display in 2019, but unfortunately it is not a permanent installation and it is no longer there. Some up close photographs of it just to see the detail. Okay. This is another piece that was in a public garden just outside of the Giardini. Carol Foyman's group of hyperreal swimmers that looked like a performance art piece until you got very close. Her work is meant to shift one's reality and enables nuanced exploration of human emotions and psychology. The Onyo Gallery in the county has some of Carol's work if you're interested in seeing some of her smaller pieces in real life. But I do know, I think like 4 summers ago, they had one of these life-size pieces there. So maybe this summer, fingers crossed, they'll have one back. Okay, so a patron of the arts lent their space in the Giudecca district of Venice to Iceland for the artist Shoplifter to show Chromio Sapiens. Shoplifter uses synthetic hair extensions, which is Shoplifter's signature material, to create large-scale installations, which was essentially a cave of multicolored fur. This piece forces you by scale and fuzziness to reflect on our collective and constant desire to return to nature in a modern culture where we are drowning in artificial matter. Okay, I'm gonna play that again. So an interesting fact, why Shoplifter calls herself Shoplifter is because when she first moved to New York, her name, and I'm gonna try to pronounce it, is Harmithur as Arnar Ondes. And people, she would be like, hi, this is my name, Hafmer, and they would reply to her, nice to meet you, Shoplifter. So she thought that was funny, so she just rolled with it. And now her official artist name is Shoplifter. Okay. So I just wanted to add that Giudecca, where the Icelandic pavilion was, is an island that is a part of Venice, but isn't attached to it by a bridge. So you have to get there by boat. It's close enough to swim, but I wouldn't. The reason I'm telling you this is because Giudecca is turning into the art island as the rest of Venice is becoming very populated with tourists. Giudecca is becoming the home to artists who want to stay in Venice, but don't want to be in the massive tourists. The Biennale has grown over the years and includes a film festival, which I'm sure you all have heard of, a performing arts and architectural show on the off years of Biennale de Arts. This year, 2021, Cecilia Elmeni, the first Italian woman, was to curate the 59th Biennale de Arts, but it has been pushed to 2022. Stan Douglas, who is a Vancouver-based filmmaker and photographer, is confirmed to be in the Canadian pavilion. I haven't heard what the theme is, but I know the architectural show that will be running this summer, the theme is How Will We Live Together, which is extremely timely for right now. Anyway, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Please feel free to ask any questions and I'll try my hardest to answer them. I'm sorry about butchering some of those names. I tried my best. And thank you again for everybody for joining us today to learn a little bit more about Venice and to take in some international art and culture. So
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephanie. I don't know who else is unmuted there. Okay, we got Lola there. Oh, I put my picture back up. I don't see too many questions.
There isn't any questions there.
I have some, and I didn't know how to type it in there because it seemed that I could answer, but I couldn't actually ask any questions. So if I can ask a couple, I was wondering if you've been there in the winter, because you talk about the light in the summer, and I'm wondering, like, do things freeze over and stuff? I don't know.
I have been there in October, and it's just this, because of the sun and the rotation of the sky, the light is a bit different, but it still is really pink. It's not as bright as it is in the summer, but it still is that color. Like, I always get really annoyed when I watch the movies and they're like, this is New York, because when you're in New York, it's a very brown tone to the light, just of where it is on the planet, but also because of the buildings and the stones that they use. that they use to build the city. So when they say it's New York and it's Vancouver, which is has this really blue hue and all the glass is blue, I get really annoyed. So that's something in cities that I really notice is like the hue of the city.
It's funny. Does it freeze over? Does it water? What is it like? How cold does it get?
It doesn't get that cold. It is in the north of Italy, but I've never heard or seen the canals freeze over.
Okay. Interesting. Lola, did you have any questions? I don't want to talk because I have a couple.
Oh, you go ahead. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did I say fuselage right?
Yes.
And you were trying, and you were saying geyser, but most people say geyser, I think. I know you asked.
The first time I ever saw one was in Iceland, and I was like, and they say geyser, like geyser.
I always think of an old geezer being some old person.
Yeah.
So how long does the Biennale run? I was curious.
The Biennale starts in May, usually the middle of May, and runs to November. And
oh my gosh! Okay.
In September, it's a huge deal. And when you're there, especially in the summertime, it's so fun because everybody's there for it, and everybody's talking about art and how they experienced it and what they wanted, like what they wanted to see, what they did see, and what they thought of it. So it's a really cool connecting with people from all over the world over sort of a shared hobby or interest or love.
I can imagine.
But on the other hand, it might be better to go in October, right? If it runs until November, because many of the tourists leave after September. Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, because the cruise ships they don't usually go after September. They don't typically go into Venice. So if you're not a people person, it might be advantageous.
Or a cruise ship person, you mean?
Yeah. Also, it's dreadfully hot in the summertime. I personally have had like blisters on my shoulders from just being on the water and the heat. So you have to be very careful of that too. If the sun and heat bother you, I would definitely look at going later on in the year.
I think Tanya has some questions she's going to forward.
Hi. So the first one's from Linda Gauthier. I hope I said that right. Does it smell in the summer from the polluted water?
I will say when I was there the first time in 2008, I noticed it severely. It stunk. The city itself has been really trying to clean up the water. And I have found the last couple of times I've gone that they've done a good job. There are times like in the mid of the day in some parts of the city that you do still smell it, but for the most part, it's not bad. Don't go swimming in it though.
And we have another one from Lenora Dixon. Would you comment about the festival with the gloriously masked and costume people? Also, do you know about the harvesting of the algae to reduce the odor?
Yeah, so Lenore, how are you, Lenore? It's nice, thank you for joining us. So that's the carnival. I've never been to the carnival, but I've heard really great things. It's a very interesting celebration. The history of that is that there was such a divide between the haves, the royalty, and the have-nots that they wanted to create this festival that everybody was sort of equal for the day. So that's why they wear masks and costumes. So you can't tell who one another is when you're sort of partying in the streets with them. And I did touch on, which I found out through my research, that it is actually illegal to wear carnival masks outside of carnival time, which I thought was very interesting. And it does, like the law says masks itself. So I think they had to sort of amend it for COVID times. Anyway, so that's to speak to Linda's comment, they are using algae and filters and stuff to get rid of the smell of the canals.
Okay, we have another one from Valerie.
Too.
Says you spoke of the cost factor in Venice. Where do you recommend someone stay, in actual Venice or on one of the islands?
I've stayed in Giudecca before at the Hilton, which is the art island, and I enjoyed it. It was a very nice hotel. It had a rooftop pool, but you are spending a lot of your time waiting for boats to get to Venice, where everything is happening. I personally would rather spend the extra bit of money in order to stay somewhere where I can walk and get up and do that and visit the other places sparse, like occasionally. So I personally would stay on Venice proper.
Okay, we have one from Catherine Gooch. I'm sorry if I'm not saying that right. I'm constantly fascinated with huge installations and how artists move them into spaces. It always makes me wonder if they ever underestimate their piece and the size of the space.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting. There was a piece done a couple of Biennales ago by a filmmaker who filmed sort of the process of the Biennale happening, and the stuff that they use to move in there, and because Venice is fairly secluded and it's hard to get stuff in there anyway, so it's like ships of things coming into the Arsenale and to the Giardini. But I have found, Catherine, that in the last couple years that, and again too, like the Canadian Pavilions film, which you just have to take a DVD or a USB stick to. And again, this year it's going to probably be film. I don't think that he's going to do any, Stan Douglas will do any photographs for this, and it'll be a film, which is great. But it is. I feel like the installations are great because it's so immersive, and you wouldn't see it. You can't see that. You can experience it on the computer or on the TV. So I agree with you. It is very, very neat.
Okay, we have another one from Lenore. She says, I really enjoyed your presentation and your vast personal knowledge. Did you go to Burano or Murano? And how about the glassware of Murano?
I've been to both Burano and Murano, and they were great. Burano, if you don't know, is an island that is the most colorful place in the world, and that's where you see all the buildings of like the bright blue and the bright purple. That's Burano. And Murano is where they have the famous glass making, and you walk around Murano and they have all the artisan glass workshops there that you can explore, and they're both very beautiful places.
Okay, one from Adriana Smith. Venice is obviously famous for its glass blowing. Are there usually any glass work in the show?
There has been. I remember once in the Italian pavilion, they had, they were glass pigeons. They were Murano glass blown pigeons, which I thought was really funny because if you've ever seen pictures of St. Mark's Square, it's just like teeming with them. So yeah, they do it, and again, it's dependent on the country. But when you're going around, it is really nice to see the artisans of Venice and of Murano do their work. I've picked up some really beautiful glass pieces of jewelry from some local artists.
Great, and then there's one more here from Valerie. How many days should you make your stay in order to really see Venice?
Again, I feel like that's something that if you're going to Venice to see Venice, I feel like 3 days is good. And I've never been to the palace, the Doge Palace or anything like that. The lines scare me, and in fact, I think the last 2 times I've been to Venice, I haven't even stepped foot in St. Mark's Square. But if you're going to Venice to be in Venice and also see the Biennale, I would give yourself a day for the Giardini, a day for the Arsenale, a day to sort of relax and do whatever, and then a day to do the offsite stuff. And there's also art galleries that bring in shows that to see too. So it's not just Biennale art stuff that's going on. The local galleries really capitalize it, and even the museums capitalize on it a lot too. In 2017, there was an artist out of somewhere down in the islands, and it's terrible, I don't remember his name. Anyway, so his pieces were he would submerge sculptures into the ocean, and then nature obviously put things on it, barnacles, and it would just start growing. These sculptures would start growing, and you could scuba dive in them and see that as they sort of changed through time and through the earth. And so he'd been doing this for years and years, and he was an offsite for his country. And just up the road, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Damien Hirst. Damien Hirst is an English artist, and he's like kind of that kind of artist that it's like, I made this, now give me like 50 million pounds. And anyway, so he had his show, which he was launching his new works. in a museum, which you had to pay it was 22 euro to get into. His yacht was parked out front of it, which was obscene. And he went in there and it was a huge ripoff of this artist that was like a block and a half up from where he was. So it was pretty gross. He got slammed pretty hard for it. But it was funny because a lot of English people would be like, "Oh, Damien Hirst is here," this is the best artist ever. But the other guy was up the road anyway. So there's just a lot of fun things going on, and everybody's really into it. I hope that answered your question.
I have one more that was left here that just popped in from Jerry Freiberg. There's two of them here. One, as a professional photographer, what gear would you travel with to cover an event like the Biennale? And then two, I can ask that after if you'd like to answer the first.
Yeah. Jerry, I travel with my 5D Mark IV with a 50 mil lens on it. I personally, when I'm photographing or going to a space to a new place, I like to go and check it out and then spend some time photographing. So I'll go out, check it out, and I don't like to haul my gear everywhere. I think it takes away from the experience, and I think even if because it takes away from the experience, I think it takes away from the work too. So I like to go and experience the place and be like, I'm going to go back here and photograph and go back there and note it. So I've experienced it and then I'm photographing it. It's like two separate worlds. And I've been doing that. I did that when I traveled. When I traveled for work, I shot with a Hasselblad, which I still to this day don't understand why I carried all that gear around, but I did. And again, I would go and experience and then photograph. I don't think you need to be gear heavy when you're a travel photographer. I think that the more interesting pieces come from mixed light, and it comes from being there, and it comes from the way you saw it. So I think just out of comfort and out of accessibility, I don't think you need to bring a whole bunch. At the Biennale itself, I personally, again, I have my 5D Mark IV. I use that with my 50 mil lens. But I have seen people that they'll bring up pop-up strobes and they'll document the show like that. But people get paid to do that. And there is a catalog that you can buy. And I think that that's worth it more than it is to spend your day cataloging the show. Spend the 80 euro on picking up the catalog. The photos that I shoot are pretty much straight out of camera. The only post I do would maybe be a little bit of cropping or color balance. When I went to school, I learned how to become a photographer in a dark room, and I could spend hours talking to you about the difference between photography and digital art. And I think that once you get it too mucked up in Photoshop, it's not a photograph anymore. There's something beautiful and pure about a photograph that I appreciate as a photographer, that I like seeing, that I find that Photoshop sort of takes away.
It's not so much a question as see if you agree with me. Never having been to Venice, and especially seeing the pictures of the Biennale, it's almost like the Biennale is an installation in itself. And I'm wondering if you felt that sometimes when you go to see a specific show, you can't take it all in. It's so much. And when I see things like the Shoplifter and the Italian display where you're walking, they're really immersing you into this art. So I guess, did you find you were exhausted at the end of the day?
Absolutely, and that's why I definitely recommend, if you're going for the Biennale, to have that day of rest, the day by the pool, because it's a lot to take in. And I mean, like, it's emotional because you're learning about all these things that are happening, good or bad, around the world. You're learning about how different people are treated. You're learning about how other people experience life full stop. So it's a lot. Like, even the walking too, it's crazy, because where you're staying, you're gonna have to walk or take the boat to the Biennale, but you're walking, like, I think the last time we were there, we averaged 22 kilometers a day just walking. So it's crazy. It is very tiring, and it is an experience, and it's something, and I really appreciate this talk today, because it's something that it does need to be reflected upon when you come back too, because it is a lot of information at once.
I think it would be life-changing seeing some of those in my, like, I just see the pictures. I would love to have been able to go through them. So one day maybe.
Yeah, I have high hopes, and I'm really expecting a lot from 2022. I'm disappointed that it's not this year. So Wendy, let's go.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Does anybody else have questions? Because I think after Jerry, there's no more. Lola, do you want to add anything?
Not necessarily. That was great, Stephanie. Thank you so much for being our first Zoom presenter. That was awesome. I hope some of you will come back next month. Our next Zoom presentation is April 14th at 2, and it's going to be me, and my topic is Morocco. So thanks again, Stephanie. That was awesome.
And I have, by name, Stephanie Trattner. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and I would be happy to talk about Venice and or the Biennale anytime. So
I think there's one more question. Oh, thank you so much. You got a thank you so much. Yeah.
Guys.
I too want to say a big thank you. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate that you did all this work, and it was a lot of work. So yeah, lots of thank yous coming in now, but that was great.
Well, maybe in 2022 we'll be able to do one about that show.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, so Lola, it's 2:30 in April the 13th, right? Or 14th, sorry. 14th, we're gonna confuse y'all. It's already on our calendar on the library website. We haven't started promoting it yet. We thought we'd get through this month, and we're opening next week. So
opening?
Oh, the gallery will be opening, so you can come and see Stephanie's work.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, Tuesday at 1. We're only opening at 1 still. So between 1 and 5, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and then Thursday 1 to 7. And we're closed Sunday, Mondays. The library itself is open at 11, but the gallery only opens at 1. Hopefully we will open soon.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so that artwork is there, and yes, thank you. Also, I meant to mention that yes, the photos are for sale as well, of course. So hopefully we'll see some of you in the gallery, including
Absolutely.
Stephanie. She can come back. I think I'll sign off from there. There's not really much more to add. I don't think.
Everybody, that was really fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.
And thank you everybody for logging in. Bye.
Thanks.